The knowledge base of what we do in medicine needs to have advanced to the point where you understand what a cell secretes, how cells communicate, and what growth factors are, and what an exosome is, and the different types of stem cells. The medical industry as a whole, and in particular, I think Big Pharma, realized very early on that cell therapy was the way the human body works, and they had to get ahead of the narrative before the science of using your cells to help you heal got kind of out of control.
Welcome to the Zero Downside podcast. I am one of the co-hosts of the show, Michael Mitchell, and I have with me Dr. Wade McKenna, our extraordinary fellowship-trained orthopedic trauma surgeon. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about the benefit of muscles and strengthening. So with that, I have a leading question to hit the episode on, which is, can you talk to me about this hope molecule, right? I've seen a ton of YouTube videos, I've read articles, and it's all about how muscles affect the brain. Can we dive into that today?
Yeah, I think that this is one of those topics that when you go through the scientific literature, there are papers from almost 20 years ago, which we were not taught in school. Not medical school, right? And medical students still aren't taught this, how unique muscle tissue is in the overall regulation of health, right? So everyone knows, I would think at this point in time, that exercise is probably good, right? And that muscle mass is a good thing, but that we're still primarily taught that muscles just to provide locomotion and skeletal power. And it's way, way more important than that. And that the hope molecule discussion, which is interesting that you'll hear more about that on TikTok than you will in a medical textbook, which is really unique, right? Because I think that social media and hopefully this podcast, right? Like that's our goal, right? Is to be able to educate people as science is evolving, instead of you reading a 5-year-old textbook that's been out of date that was out of date before it was written, right? I mean, that's the problem with the book we're trying to do now, is every time I'm about finished, I no longer, the things have expanded much more than half of what I've written. And it's been very difficult to write a real-time text. We're in the middle of the stem cell primer, and kind of difficult when, even just with a deep dive on the scientific side, outside of clinical literature, which I think is really important, the hope molecule appears starting around 2019, maybe, but the actual skeletal muscle functions as a neurohormone regulator for brain health and depression, goes back, papers in 2009, right? And actually not even just discussing muscle activation as a way of combating obesity, which is really important, right? Because muscle secretes peptides and pre-hormones that regulate overall insulin resistance, right, which is a huge topic with the GLP-1s, because that's generally accepted now as one of the keys to controlling obesity. And obesity is a huge problem, right? That is probably the overwhelming reason as far as a comorbid factor for all the other stuff we treat, right? So if you're obese, are you more likely to have joint pain? Yeah. If you're obese, are you more likely to be easily depressed? Yes. These aren't my opinions. These are things that have been published, right? And some of that is genuinely fairly intuitive, I would think, right? I've been that guy. I was 310 pounds a year and a half ago, right? All you have to do is an internet search on lectures I've given all over the world, it's depressing to me.
You've been very unkind in descriptions of yourself in those videos.
Well, it's hard to watch. Like, there's some footage of, like, where I really like what I was saying. I like how ahead of a lot of the clinics now being opened talking about PRP and bone marrow, I like how ahead of the curve we were, because I was speaking in Europe about those topics with the promotion of the Harvest catheter and some of the new kit changes for bone marrow aspiration a decade ago, longer than a decade ago. And so when you search those and see those, it's pretty easy to see that I was pretty metabolically broken. I was really busy. I was under a lot of stress. There's a lot of cortisol, which is bad. And I was obviously insulin resistant and probably hypogonadic, I mean, as far as my testosterone and everything else. So I was pretty metabolically broken. And I think that wellness was not something I was seeking. I was adopting, or certainly had lived by, the Western medicine rule of just treating the illnesses as they pop up. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of playing whack-a-mole with my own health, right? Like, okay, this hurts now. Wow. And so when you're playing whack-a-mole, it depends on what problem pops up its head and if you can get to it in time before it turns into a different problem. Right? That's literally how I was handling my own healthcare, and it was disastrous. And then did I have muscle mass? Well, sure. Was I optimizing my wellness with that muscle mass? No. Right? I was kind of an inflammatory mess. I think when we talk about hope molecule, mm-hmm. Muscle secretion and thinking of muscle as an overall wellness precursor, and I think that's going to be the key. So when we talk about being metabolically broken and obese and stress and cortisol and your hormone dysfunction, do you have to supplement each one of those different areas to get better? No, because the muscle and your cells are capable of secreting all of those. The problem is, as you get older, you can't secrete enough to keep up with metabolic demands. And so you start operating in a net deficit. So over time, the structure and function kind of go away. Muscle becomes stiffer, smaller, more full of fat. Your gut starts becoming more adipocytic, meaning you're adding some body fat, mm-hmm. losing visceral muscle. I think that overall you're declining in cognitive ability. Your sleep patterns get worse. Your ability to operate in an oxidative or glycolic state changes. You start not burning fatty acids as effectively and creating as much ATP at a cellular level for mitochondrial function. That's the basis of all the rest of everything else, right? So when your mitochondria in a cell aren't affected, aren't acting normal, and aren't getting the maximum burn for the calorie input, that's the destruction of everything else. So everything starts going down. And I think that the hope molecule is probably more than a molecule. It's probably a blend of what we would now call myokines. We've talked about cytokines since episode 1. Mm-hmm. And cytokines, the inflammatory molecules that kind of destroy cellular production and are important in activating certain cycles, but we never really talk about myokines. And myokines are, because we talk about cellular secretions, because we can hack that, right? If you use bone marrow aspirate concentrate, you're getting myokine production, but from at a cellular level, because a lot of things that are myokines, BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, right? BDNF is a myokine. Okay, that it's called brain-derived neurotropic factor. So, must be from the brain. Some of it is secreted by the stem cell, for sure. That is a well-described bone marrow aspirate concentrate secretion that makes a difference in health and wellness and muscle mass and cognitive function. But BDNF is also secreted by the muscle. So BDNF is a myokine. PGC1 alpha is probably one of the more important myokines that may not be secreted in any other real tissue other than muscle. Now, most of these enzymes or peptides that become an enzyme or a hormone or a ligand, because they all start as peptides, right? Amino acid chains. Under 50 usually, at 50 to 100 becomes a polypeptide, but just a peptide in general. And, much bigger than that, it's a hormone. But peptide in general, if you're going to discuss what peptides are secreted with muscle, that could be part of the HOPE molecule, or that would be classified as myokines. There's 50, 80 that have been documented, especially now that there's been a pretty decent skeletal muscle experimental construct. The problem with a lot of skeletal muscle studies is they're all rat studies, right? Mice. But now in the lab, there is a pretty decent experimental model created to measure overall muscle secretions and function, because now that we have way better control of the genome and genetic stuff, you can literally have muscle that is programmed to be muscle in a 3D construct, and now you can measure what it does in its environment. And I think that now the way I would describe muscle is, and the way it's described in the scientific literature, but not yet the clinical literature. I mean, clinical, real quick, because a lot of people may not know the difference. Clinical literature is what doctors do. Right? When you go see a doctor, he should be treating you based on what's out there, what's been done in studies that has been verified to have a therapeutic effect, and still be able to talk to you about the potential downside of that therapy or drug or treatment or exercise program, because it's been published in the clinical literature. We have human examples of things working. That's clinical science. That's stuff been done to people. Scientific literature may or may not involve a human study at all, but it involves like the cellular pathophysiology, like what happens to the mitochondria when you do this, what happens to the tissue when you do that, right? So most of the peptide or molecular scientific data, which is what a molecule would be classified under, is still the guys in the lab, a bunch of PhD guys running it that don't have a medical license to treat patients. And until the medical license guys, and really the problem is it's always a drug company, right? That's the problem, is the scientific literature starts based on funding. Funding comes from people looking to make a profit from something, and that normally gets controlled under the auspices of who can turn what you're doing in the lab into a product that I can make money on. And
something that can be patented.
It has to be able to be commercialized.
Right.
So the commercialization of scientific literature prevents it turning into clinical science until someone drives that, right? The overall driver of that may accomplish some great things, like Western medicine has done some great things, right? Like organ transplant, the suppression of certain diseases, the treatment of bacterial things. Like, it's not everything. Not all drugs are bad, right? Some of the drugs that they turn on that may have made a big difference in your overall health and wellness. I don't understand why Western medicine turns on certain things, but I think it's because the profit margin changes, right?
It's a fair assessment.
Yeah. So that if there's not that commercialization driver between this, the scientific literature, and this, the clinical delivery, then you get a lot of things lost in the shuffle. And I think that the muscle as an endocrine organ has certainly been lost in the shuffle.
You think we've just dumbed it down? by saying my endorphins were up. That's why when I exercised and worked out, I felt great. I got my runner's high. I got this or that. Oh, the bigger the muscle, the easier it is to burn fat because you're burning more calories. I mean, we've kind of.
I think it's all a generalization. Well, I think it's a generalization, but that's what they were teaching in school.
Yeah.
Because again, we didn't understand the molecular pathways yet, right? We can get the clinical science. Hey, when you work out and get strong, those people seem to be less depressed. Mm-hmm. Hey, when you work out and get strong, those people have less body fat. It's the why, right? The how. Like what? Like everything in your body is a communication from one cell to another to modify. That's so that's the definition. So I was going to say muscle is an endocrine gland, a paracrine gland, and an apocrine gland. So a gland that secretes hormones, if it's an endocrine gland, it secretes hormones that have an effect on distant tissue. Okay? Your adrenals, when they secrete those fight or flight enzymes, that hormone control of muscle activation, that is secreted by an organ, and those have an effect on distant tissues. Your heart rate increases. Your skin, you contract you get vasocontraction in the skin, so you get more centralized blood supply, so you can react faster. You're not digesting food at that point, because if you're running from a bear, your bowels aren't working, right? Like unless they're going to work all at once.
Unless there's an involuntary.
Right, yeah, an involuntary response. But it's certainly not digesting food at its optimal level when you're running from a bear, right? Yeah. Because the glandular secretions from an endocrine gland is having an effect on distant tissues, on your bowel to keep you from digesting food, on your skin to keep you from bleeding when you scratched up in the woods, because it's contracting all that blood supply to a central system. Your heart rate's going to be elevated. Now, that's an endocrine function. A paracrine function is when it secretes hormones or neural activators or neurotropic factors or peptides that have a direct effect on adjacent tissue, right? The hypothalamus for brain support, the secretion of, for parathyroid to thyroid, right? So the secretion to help healthy thyroid tissue, the thalamic index in the brain. There's a lot of evidence of paracrine gland secretion. Muscle acts directly on its adjacent tissues with its secretions also. And then apocrine gland, or a self-hormone regulating thing, is the tissue that can secrete things that help it accomplish its function too, or make it healthier. Muscle does all that. And it's a very unique tissue because it's one of the only tissues that does all that. And we have underappreciated that because we generalized it. All right, well, if you work out, people that work out are less depressed. Okay, why would that be? Oh, you know what? Because muscle secretes neurotransmitters and hormones that with certain amount of aerobic exercise 3 times a week at moderate intensity, those people had significant less depression. And that was published like in 2009, right? So almost 20 years ago, there was a study showing that exercise decreased your impression. But why? Okay, because now we know PGC alpha 1, oh my gosh, like it acts on BDNF and brain-derived neurotropic factor and all these different things that can provide the sense of wellness, like that hope molecule, right? But it's really the secretion of myokines to, you know what, if you're not insulin resistant, like insulin resistance is associated with depression. Insulin resistance is associated with obesity. Muscle helps prevent hyperinsulinemia. I mean, you don't have a whole lot of insulin in your blood because muscle can metabolize that for you, right? So we generalized all that. Oh, you get endorphins from work. Maybe it's not just some endorphin. It's not all about dopamine. I get dopamine's a big deal, right? I'm not saying. Of course it is. I'm not saying dopamine's not a big deal. Okay, please don't take that from me. What I am saying though is it's way more complicated than that, and we weren't capable of understanding it in the same sense we are now. The same way in the beginning of stem cell function though, right? Like, I mean, it used to be You put stem cell, when you take bone marrow aspirate and put it in the knee, and you'll still hear guys say, these cells turn to cartilage, and that's why you have cartilage, because the cells you put in the knee will become cartilaginous tissue. If you radioisotope tag those cells, less than 10% of them are really incorporated into that joint. Very few. But they have a secretory effect on the way your body decides to heal that joint, because you're taking the cell that your body has that is very unique, capable of secreting all these peptides and secretory factors that affect health and wellness the way muscle can, and you're putting them in a joint so that they can kind of get it on your body's to-do list, right? Now you start to heal. And it's really well published that going back 20 years ago, if you do scope on 1,000 patients and 500 of them you put bone marrow in at the day of the scope after you clean it out, and 500 of them you don't, none of the ones you didn't have more cartilage at 6 months. Pretty much all the ones that you did have more cartilage at 6 months, and on average it can be as high as 20%. Wow, that sounds like a lot, right? All the ones that didn't have 10% less. Okay, that sounds like why would I do a scope and not take your bone marrow while you're asleep, concentrate it down, make it into bone marrow aspirate concentrate, and inject it into the tissue, because it lowers your infection rate. Because guess what? A lot of these peptide therapies that the muscle secretes do, they're also really involved in immune modulation, protecting your other tissue around it, and helping prevent infection by increasing the vascular supply, the blood supply. It washes out the disease, right? That's where, so muscle can also, we're taught there's a downside to working out too hard too. Like it secretes all these cytokines and activate. Yes, and if you don't have the right peptide therapy available from the adjacent tissue, you can get abnormal soreness, and working out may not be a great thing for everyone. You can almost get a rhabdomyolytic effect, meaning that the muscle kind of inflames so much that it hurts. So
it starts to eat itself.
Right? So, yeah, it can be destructive.
So that's where supplementation kicks in, right?
Yeah.
You've talked about that with peptides. You've talked about it with vitamins. And again, your statement that still my favorite is, which vitamin is the best vitamin for that patient, right? Yeah. And your answer is always,
well, the one you're deficient in.
Yeah,
right. Because that's the same thing when you're trying to help someone navigate the waters. And so the hope molecule with muscle. Do I think that we can help people have more skeletal muscle mass? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do I have to be a trainer in a gym to help you have more muscle mass? No, because sometimes working out it's very difficult, especially in the face of trying to lose a lot of weight, to maintain muscle mass when you're on some GLP-1s, which is great. Like, we want to help you not be at the same health level from your obesity, and the amount of adipose tissue you have is really hard to have a significant amount of muscle mass if you have a big high adipose tissue propensity in your body, or percentage-wise your BMI is too high. Can I help you with peptide therapy? Because it's about growth hormone releasing peptides, growth hormone releasing hormones. Do I think random growth hormone, do we just put people on growth hormone? Absolutely not. First of all, it's against the law. Second of all, if I put you on growth hormone, your body will shut down its own growth hormone production. Are there ways to help your body maintain higher levels of growth hormone and secondary IGF-1 production with peptides that are growth hormone releasing peptides that can turn into growth hormone releasing hormones? Yes. Should most people at some point in their journey to wellness through GLP-1s, which is semaglutide or Wegovy Ozempic, or tirzepatide, which is Mounjaro, the brand names, which we don't use a lot of brand name medications in our clinic, because there are way less expensive ways to get that peptide into a person than going through a drug company that patented a delivery method for a peptide that my statement is always God owns the IP on that, right? Like when, right? So I think that's the problem with most peptides. Now, have a lot of them turned into drugs? Yep, right. But when it becomes a drug, did they patent the peptide? Well, kind of, yeah. So they get a patent for the chain of those amino acids. Ish, right? Because it has like hydroxyl on one end and H2 on the other, and so that chain. But if they just discovered it, and the body makes it, what if you could figure out a way to just make the body make it better, right? Like with growth hormone, and would that give you the same effect as if your body was making it on its own at a level when you were younger? Yeah, right? So the goal would be, if you're on a GLP-1 agonist to lose weight, how do I keep your growth hormone levels up, your IGF-1 levels up, support some muscle mass, add muscle mass to people that we don't, the term, I hate the term, but you
I know it's coming.
But it's very accurate because there is the term out there, and you'll hear it when you talk about Ozempic. They talk about Ozempic face or Ozempic butt, or what they're talking about is skinny fat, right? People that lose weight, but you lose some of the elasticity in your collagen. You lose some of the subcutaneous muscle mass that really makes people look young and healthy. Do I think when people lose weight, they want to look gaunt and unhealthy? No, I'm pretty sure that wasn't. I know that wasn't my goal. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to lose weight to look worse. Although I'll tell you, physical appearance wasn't something I've ever, obviously, if you look at the videos from the past, it's not something I really paid much attention to. It has never been the primary motivator in the way I feel about myself, for sure. My self-image comes from being a good father, working hard to raise 3 daughters, the care and time I put into taking care of patients, the scientific drive I've had at night outside of the clinical side of medicine to make sure that the clinical side stays elevated. That's where all my self-esteem came from. So physical appearance was way low on the list until it's so broken that it's hard to do all the rest of it. It's hard to have the energy to be a good father. It was hard to have the energy to play the whack-a-mole with your health. And so some of those health problems start getting a little out of control. And all of a sudden you realize, man, if I want to stick around for my kids, you got to stop just putting your finger in the leaky hole every time the boat's sinking, right? It's time to fix the boat. And not only that, but make sure it's going in the right direction. Like a boat just sailing, it's very biblical reference. Just listlessly on the water without direction is not the way you want to treat your health. And so for me, the GLP-1 agonists, getting a lot of cellular volume that was administered in very unique ways, in ways not really legal in the U.S. Peptide therapy, delivered in a way that can help with collagen maintenance and muscle mass, right? So that hormone regulation, now getting some muscle mass back. Mm-hmm. Like, can I help someone get muscle mass without hurting themselves? Yeah. You know what? We have the coolest toy in the world, because there is a way with that you can stimulate muscle contraction, just like if you were forcibly doing it. And with 30 minutes, I can recreate what you would do in 100 setups a day for a year, laying on a table for 30 minutes on your phone. If you've had back surgery, that's how I got so broken, right? I mean, 5 back surgeries, a period of 3 years. Gained 70 pounds and never felt good enough to even get it off, because every time I tried to work out, it was a choice between working out or maybe being able to not go to work the next day. So I would just make the decision to go to work the next day and try to do as much as I could. When that stopped working, it was time to figure out a different way. But muscle mass with M-Sculpt, which is without giving it a direct brand name shout out, which we just did. It's
all right.
You're welcome. You're welcome,
BTL. Yeah.
But with electromagnetic contractions, can we build muscle? Yeah, it's very well published. The machine we use is 1,000 times stronger than Russian E-stim. And with Russian E-stim, can you build muscle with electric stimulation of muscle mass? Certainly. Can you get the deep kind of contraction that can be fulminant and then let the machine tap out the bad stuff, all the cytokines that you get from working out that will cause you to be sore? Can you do that and have the same amount of soreness as I would if I went to the gym and did 1,000 setups? No, because the machine will tap all that out. So, am I going to hurt my back doing a crunch and setup? Yes, with where I was for sure. But do I need to get abs back so that my back isn't under so much pressure? Yeah, so how do you navigate this storm? Well, we can help you with changing your exercise routine. And it's like trying to get deltoid after shoulder surgery. Are there ways to do it? Yes, I can change your workouts. I do elbow below the plane, all this. But is it easier to lay on a table and in 4 treatments in a period of a month, or 2 a week for 2 weeks, or 1 a week for 4? If in any group we treat, 12 weeks after that, on average, you have 20% less fat in whatever area we treated, and 30% more density in your muscle and secondary strength. And if you need muscle mass for neurohormone regulation and overall wellness, and oh, by the way, do you feel better? Do you have that hope molecule for the neurotropic support? Are you less depressed? Yeah. Did you have to go for a run to be less depressed? No. Do some people need to go for a run to be less depressed? Yes. Is it just about the secretions of muscle for those people? No. Then it is some of the endorphins. But again, whatever you're getting your dopamine hit from, your body will acquiesce if you're only getting it from one spot. The only thing that your body doesn't get used to where you get less and less of a dopamine hit with the same amount of activity, whether it's gambling, whether it's an unhealthy addiction to porn or sex or throwing dice or whatever it is that people get their little dopamine hit from. Smoking. I think that drugs, heroin, right, crack, do you get the same amount of hit from an endorphin perspective every time you do that? No, your body gets used to it. The only thing out there that doesn't do that is like a cold plunge. Right? So if you cold plunge, the dopamine response that you get to that, your body doesn't get used to.
Is that just because you're putting your body into a state of stress that's intentional? Or?
I think it's much more, and this hasn't been tied into what happens with your muscle mass and perfusion and the driving of myokines, right? So I think that muscle doesn't know the difference when it's contracted or stimulated or under stress. And so it doesn't get used to and limit the amount of dopamine that you're going to get. Do you get the same amount of dopamine from jumping into a cold plunge for 3 minutes as you would from doing some other things that are bad for you? Maybe not. But you're going to get it more reliably. Now, is there a way we help you derive those same health benefits from muscle contraction and stimulation that I can augment? If you've been on GLP-1 agonists and now you have that skinny fat thing, how do I get muscle mass back? There's a lot of peptides that have been very well published and some great, not only textbooks outside of what they're going to give you in medical school, but certainly in the scientific literature to show that there are certain growth hormone releasing peptides that your body doesn't get used to. And that every time we give them to you, they don't secondarily suppress your own growth hormone secretion. They augment your ability to have the growth hormone effects on your IGF-1. Does somatotropin, growth hormone, have a lot of downside? Yes, because it will long-term suppress your body's ability to manufacture growth hormone. Does tesamorelin or samorelin or cimarelin or ipamorelin or CJC 1295, Does that have the same amount of suppression on secondary growth hormone, and you get used to it over time? No.
Because you're promoting your body's own growth hormone.
Because you're helping your body do a better job of getting rid of some of the receptor issues that you have as you get older. And your body secretes a lot less growth hormone as you get older, and you don't get enough IGF-1 out of it, and you start moving more to the glycolic pathway instead of the fatty acid pathway when it comes to generating ATP molecules, and your energy levels go down. You don't have as much muscle mass. It affects the mitochondria. We can help someone switch that path a little bit with certain peptides administered in certain ways to aid you in avoiding that depleted state where your IGF-1s aren't high enough, you don't have enough muscle mass, the muscle is too hard to get a bang for your buck. Like just telling someone go pound it out in the gym, they may not be able to metabolically do that if they've been losing a bunch of weight. Like you kind of have to pick between building muscle or losing weight. And I will tell you that until you get your adipose tissue under control, muscle in and of itself may not be the real answer. It's certainly a part of the story, but just going to the gym and doing heavy lifting is maybe not going to change your overall cardiac health and your body morphology as much as you would like. I think that it's a combination is certainly important. And I think that as you build some muscle, you're going to notice you feel a lot better because of the neurohormone secretion. Do I think there's a way to augment with certain peptides to help people get that? Absolutely.
Right.
Like, do I think that there's certain peptides you have to be careful with? Like using MK, ibutyramycin. I think, is there a downside to that? Yeah, if you do it wrong. Is there a significant upside to that used correctly in short bursts that your body doesn't get used to, that you can secrete the pulsatile effect of your own growth hormone naturally with administration of that peptide? Absolutely. Now, can you do that if you're a Division I athlete? No. Am I a Division I athlete? Right? Like, no. Like, how much of the population is getting tested for a substance that makes you competitive? We're competing in life, right? Like, I'm not competing against someone else. I'm competing against myself. My goal is to compete against death, dying, morbidity, the mortality associated with being unhealthy, right? If your game in the game of life, if that's what your competition is, it is silly to let any organization, regardless of how well funded, limit your ability to get better.
This leads me to my last real question on this topic. We've talked about.
I know that's a big roundabout
No.
answer.
You've done great. The last thing I really want to get input from you on is we've talked about the use of muscle in fat loss. We've talked about it in brain function and health. Talk to me about inflammatory responses and immunohealth, right? And just general immunity in the body and the muscles utilization there.
So one of our favorite peptides is BPC 157. And when you look at the metabolic pathway of all these, you're going to see that, oh, by the way, it also mitigates inflammatory load. Like muscle breaks down IGL-6, IGL-9. Oh, are those myokines? Yeah, but those are the inflammatory molecules that may not be good, right? Like, is overall systemic inflammatory load, if you just work all the time and you're not very healthy, can you put yourself into a ditch metabolically? Yes, right? Appropriately built muscle is really important, but helping your body maintain a low inflammatory load as you change your body composition and your activity level is really, really important. Because if inflammatory loads, your body doesn't respond well to the changing of its composition in short bursts. Like long road, your body will kind of navigate the storm. But if you're trying to make some short changes. Like I don't want to take 10 years to go from what I looked like last year to this. It was hard to take a year to do it, right? But it took a year because I will tell you that I had a year's worth of work to do. Do I deserve any credit for all the hard work to get the effects that I've gotten from the treatments that we've administered through our clinic? No, not really, right? Did I have to exercise some really significant self-discipline on it? I had to pay attention a little. I had to have a refrigerator. I had to not be afraid of an insulin needle that you can't even feel. I had to not be afraid of a little lab. Yeah. I had to not set myself up for failure mentally and emotionally, because as you start seeing little changes, do you have some wavering in your self-esteem? Do you also need to read? Do you also need to develop some emotional support? Do you also, yeah, right? Like it's being integrated or whole is a little bit more work than just going to the gym. Did I spend 3 to 5 hours a week in the gym? No. I mean, I tell the story all the time. My daughter, who's had the same dramatic transition in physical appearance and mental and emotional health, do I think that she did way more work and did a lot of things and really did a lot more right than I did? Yeah. Right? Like she did yoga. She went to therapy. Like she did, like she got integrated, right? Like she became, she got a degree in psychology. She thinks holistically. She doesn't eat processed food. I'm really proud of her. Did I do all the same things?
I have watched you do terrible things to a perfectly good sandwich by ripping it apart and deconstructing it.
Oh, for sure. Like I get rid of bread. I get rid of all the carbs. I will eat just the meat, for sure. Right? Like I made some monumental steps as far as getting away from sugar and kind of pretty much getting away from any processed, over-processed foods and all that kind of destroys you metabolically. Yes. Do I think that all that is an inflammatory? Do I think sugar is inflammatory? Absolutely, right? Do I think that hyperinsulinemia, because you're insulin resistant, is an inflammatory thing? Yes. Do I think that we can help people navigate the storm through that with wellness? And the orthopedic part's been crucial too, right? Like I'm not ignoring that I'm an orthopedic surgeon. If you have a broken joint that's getting locked and caught all the time, is it stand a chance of not being inflamed with activity? No. Oh, right. Every time you have a bursa around that can get inflamed, and every time if you have a partial thickness tear of your cuff, good luck unless we get that to heal, right? And do we have ways of helping you heal without necessarily talking about surgical intervention? Of course, right?
Yeah, I'm a year and a half out,
and you've still not even done a follow-up MRI.
Sorry.
You just went right back to jiu-jitsu, and when you could move your arm, and now you're not only having to fight with your right hand, you became better, right? Which is what I would do, right? Yeah. Which is what I've done, right? Like we have a buddy we talked about one time on the Cool Leaf episode. Oh, shout out to that we just gave them radio frequency ablation of a painful joint, where he came in. And he needs reconstructed. He needs some significant orthopedic work. And he was going to come back and do that at the end of football season because we ablated him during football season. Made it through football season. He's going to come back and get reconstructed. It's May. Guess who hasn't been back to be reconstructed?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So it's one of those things that would I do the same thing? Yeah, if it doesn't hurt enough to get my attention and I can keep on keeping on, I'm probably deuces. I'm out, right? Like I'm no reason to get real aggressive. I think that, but again, the whole discussion on health and wellness is we have not focused enough, and no one functions enough nutritionally even. Everyone that talks about nutrition and everything, we have not focused enough on the importance of healthy muscle mass. And I think the importance of skeletal muscle and giving you the metabolic pathways to help maintain skeletal muscle mass with growth hormone production in a healthier way than growth hormone supplementation is way, way underlooked. And matter of fact, I would bet right now, if we called 90% of the clinics that are using GLP-1 agonists have no way of helping you avoid a lot of the complications and side effects of dramatic, fast weight loss and your overall metabolic activity of your own muscle to be able to liberate yourself from constant use of a GLP-1 agonist at max dose. Because you can, if you add muscle mass, you won't need GLP-1 agonists at max dose to maintain the same level of health as you get to the point where you have more muscle mass contributing to your overall metabolic rate. And I would say that if someone is putting me on a GLP-1 agonist that wasn't treating my diabetes, if I was taking it for obesity, I would want to go and ask the physician, what do you have to help me keep my growth hormone levels up so that I can stay active and feel good? And I'm still not sleeping right, or I'm still are there, DSIP's one of your favorite.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Some really good literature out there on Delta Sleep. Now, do I think that you can just do the peptide without focusing on your sleep cycles? No, I think there's a little bit more to it than that. Do I think melanotan too? If you have sexual wellness issues, if you don't have overall appropriate hormone, but I did my test and it says I'm normal for age. Normal for age is taking 1,000 people in your age, measuring their amount. Do I think that people over time, things lower? Do I think that's optimal function? No. But that still may be fine. So say your testosterone level's fine. Mm-hmm. But I still I thought if I went on testosterone, everything would work better, and my erectile function and my libido and all that. There may be more to it than that, right? Has melanotan too been associated with dramatic changes in overall sexual wellness? Yep. There's dosing schedules for people that just want to get a little tan to avoid a lot of photosensitivity issues. There's dosing schedules for people that have dramatic, because of secondary diabetes or other things, may have some sexual dysfunction problems. Yep. Are they the same dosing schedule for everyone? No. You need to have it done by a doctor.
Yes.
And not made by a gym bro. Which we make fun of the gym bro thing all the time, but I will tell you right now that all advice you get from the gym bro, if they look like you want to look, that ain't all bad advice.
Yeah, well,
right. Let me tell you, because we're looking like I look. Do I have more knowledge than some of those people in the gym as far as telling you how to do it? Yeah, but had I done it? No. Fair. Why would I take advice from someone that hasn't done it to see if it worked? Right. The guy in the gym that looks like I want to look, if I say, hey, what do you do? You're probably, now, do I think it's necessarily going to be safe and healthy? Maybe not, but it was successful. Now, is you're genetically going to respond to the same thing that guy's doing? Maybe not, right? So I do think that you have someone guide you down the path with a little bit of that knowledge, but maybe don't discount everything that you get in that. I learn stuff from patients every week where they're saying, I started doing this, and then I changed to this, and I did my vitamin. That's fat. And then I do a deep dive and find out why. And you know what? The guy had no idea why, but he certainly felt the difference. And so he had a clinical result that I didn't understand the scientific answer to. So my job was to go find the scientific answer to why he got that anecdotal evidence.
Same thing with bone marrow, right? You talked about it earlier in the episode. They injected it in the knee. Great. I think
People
it put
did better.
cartilage in there. Yeah, people did better, but the science wasn't there yet, right?
No,
It's the
because
same
now we
thing.
know it's about what the cells secrete, not what they become. The same way with muscle. It's about what it secretes, not how big it is. But if it's secreting all the right stuff, is bigger muscle usually better? Yeah, because it's got more surface area. It's capable of more. It has more healthy tissue. It's not a bunch of apoptotic, dead, white, destroyed scar tissue, right? So I think that all of that to say, muscle's really important, but can we navigate the storm, help you lose a bunch of weight, help you look the way you do, take you out of pain? I think it's all that combined, and I don't know how to talk about let's not play whack-a-mole with health problems.
Well, to be fair to a statement that you made, navigating a storm, right? How do you navigate something? You do it with guidance. You do it with help. And that's where a physician that's well-trained, well-versed, well-researched, and has personally experienced a lot of success through it is helpful. And you've talked about one thing that you always open my eyes to is it's a rotation, right? You're not going to prescribe 20 peptides and have somebody literally look like a human pincushion the second they get it home. It's not going to work, right? You're going to experience failure.
Especially for like depression or cerebral function or CTE, post-concussion syndrome, TBI, stroke patients. There's 3 peptides that a combination of together can make a huge difference. It's really well published on cognitive learning, cognitive ability, memory, neuroplasticity, depression, right? But you have to kind of navigate the storm, right? There's 3 that you want to kind of mix up. You don't do them every day. So there's a little bit more to it because we need to know what you have to know what to treat. Right. But I don't think that you have to allow someone organizationally to govern or put a governor on your ability to get better. Like there are, no matter how healthy you are, is there a higher goal for, do I know a lot of incredible athletic people, whether they're a pro athlete or just an 80-year-old that looks fantastic? Yes, we took care of someone in the clinic this week, late 70s. As we're putting her to sleep, her skin, she could pass for late 40s. I mean, her skin is fantastic, right? Does she do a lot of things right? Yes. Do I have access to all those kind of people in my life as examples of what to do and what not to do? Yeah. Is some of it just genetic? Yeah. But I think that really when you have those examples out there and those people, they didn't allow someone else to tell them. You know what? They still want the bar set higher. Was the point, was that no matter how healthy someone is, especially the healthier people are, when I was dramatically broken, my goal wasn't to look good. My goal was to not be tired all the time. My goal was to feel better. Once you start feeling better and you drop 80 pounds, do your goals change? Yeah, now I want hair. Now I want to get rid of my bald spot. Now I want my skin to not look like it's sagging off me. Now I want some muscle mass, right? But did I start out wanting that? No, but the healthiest people in our practice are the best patients because they keep setting the bar higher for themselves because they know what's possible. And it's a lot easier to get healthier than it is to just overcome the original storm of just being metabolically broke, right? So at any point, are there ways to help people achieve that next level? Yeah. And the people, once you get someone out of the ditch, then the goals change dramatically, right? Yeah. When someone comes in with their knee swollen and hurting all the time, their goal is just to, can I get off of the pain medicine some way? Can I get up and down out of a chair? If your only goal is to get up and down out of a chair, like, are you worried about your hair, your skin, your sexual wellness, how you sleep at night? No. You're worried about, I'm taking all these narcotics, my bowels are shut down, I feel like crap, and I'm having trouble going to work, right? So let's address all that, and then see if we can get you to the point where we're kind of micromanaging health routes, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you've done wonders in my personal life as well. You've gotten me back to plugging holes in a boat. You've helped me lose 50 pounds. You've gotten me where I'm physically active and mentally more active, right? I found that as I lost the weight, as I felt better, I was reading more. I was experiencing more in life. I was enjoying time with my kids more. All the things that you've addressed. So for my part in the episode, thank you personally for the help that you've given me and my family members, right? I've got several. And I genuinely and thoughtfully appreciate the guidance and the navigating the difficult waters, as you talked about. For my part, we've hit all the questions that have been asked by viewers online.
We have all these papers
comments
in front of us that we didn't talk about.
Of course, there's never enough time. But I want to give you a couple minutes as we sign off, just to give closing thoughts and what I think has been a really informative episode.
Yeah, I think, in all sincerity, my goal in trying to use this platform is to just give people enough of an education to be your own advocate and to not just listen to someone else's narrative on what's available. And even in our clinic, when people come in, you still have to ask questions for us to know what it is you want. Like, there'll be people come in for their knee and never realize, oh my gosh, you do carpal tunnel? I mean, stupid stuff like that, right? And we're like, yeah, I'm a trauma surgeon, right? Like, there's not a lot of things that I can't at least help you with or give you the right advice to help you figure out what you want to do. But I think that with all of the humbleness that is out there from knowing that it's a way more complicated world to get better to where you feel better. It's about energy and muscle mass and sleeping right and being healthy and having an active sex life and being a good father and being someone that can look like you're not being afraid to try on clothes. Like, Lord, I have jeans that I've had 20 years ago because I didn't want to go try on other jeans, right? So with all sincerity, it is my sincere desire to make it easier for you to be happy. And I genuinely appreciate the trust that all of our patients have had in us. I appreciate the continued support we've gotten. Hopefully this platform is making it easier for people to know what questions to ask. And we want to thank you very much for your support, for liking and subscribing to an episode, all the way up to the reviews you give us as a patient and the trust you've given us with your surgical care. And I genuinely mean that. It's the most sincere thing that I say every week is thank you, and we appreciate that.